go on the road. Okay. I'll call the meeting to order, and as usual, we start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Public comment. Okay, and as usual, I will ask for public comment. Okay, public is quiet. Here to listen. Good. Media comments. Media comments. Even better. All right. Okay, just let me say a quick word about what we're doing today. The primary purpose of this is familiarize the board and our evaluation team with each of the individual companies and their approach and so forth. We're going to have a Q&A, but I will ask that the questions and answers be restricted to the board members and to the evaluation. Primary purpose, we want to move ahead with the analysis, and we need to get the information to get ahead. Just in terms of that, what we hope we'll be able to have the evaluation spot. We'll go back and then come back very soon. Actually, the 30th, the recommendation for the board, which the board will make a decision on. Okay, and with that,
Mr. President, just to make a remark, there's not a board forum here.
No, it's not. This is not a board meeting. Let me explain that if I can. The primary purpose, if we were going our normal route of doing an evaluation, we would typically have at this point perhaps sent out an RFP and then responses to them. We felt we had enough information in the RFI to proceed into this next phase. Now, I can take the blame. I felt that given the interest of the board and the public in this reserve study, given the fact that the last one was done in 2006, that it would be instructive both for the public, of course this will be video, and those board members who could make it to the meeting. Now those who can't have already had this package in their inbox. And of course they'll be able to see the video. So the purpose of this meeting is really, it's an evaluation team with the board present to be educated.
So this is not a board meeting.
This is not the board. Okay, and with that, I'd like to introduce Douglas Green, who is doesn't have your title.
But president of DMA.
Oh.
I'll be happy to take over since you don't know me as well as I know myself. I'm not going to use a microphone because I tend to walk around and I don't trust those. So if you can't hear me, let me know. As I said, I'm president of DMA. It's the official name is Design Management Associates. We go under DMA Interactive Reserves now, relative to reserve studies. The company was formed in 1994, so we're 21 years old now as a company. I have been working with community associations since 1986. Started in another firm. I'm an architect, and I had an architectural firm with a partner. NCARB, after my name, means National Council of Architectural Registration Boards, which just means that national certificate for registration in any state. RS is Reserve Specialist, which is specifically related to capabilities of preparing reserve studies. Having worked with associations since 1986, and my initial services to that was relative to architectural control issues in communities. I'm sure you're very familiar with those. Having done that for a number of years, I spent a lot of time actually working out of community association offices. I have a pretty good idea of how associations work, how boards work. I spent a lot of time in front of boards dealing with compliance and control issues. Worked with a lot of community managers and know many, many community managers. In 1994, my work was becoming so strong related to community associations that I actually split from my partner in that architectural firm and started DMA specifically to do work for homeowner associations and developers of new communities. So that is our client that we focus on. As you'll see, there's 3 RSs in our corporate office, myself, Tim Rormoser, and Roy Calista. Tim is a professional engineer, a civil engineer, structural engineer, and he was actually a competitor of mine in the early 2000s in reserve studies. And we were basically regional providers in Central Virginia doing that. We put our firms together about 2009 and created an entirely new process for doing reserve analyses, which we call interactive reserve analysis, and I'm going to explain that in a moment. But that allowed us to essentially offer our services through the use of highly integrated software and through the use of technology, as we're playing with today, to offer our services essentially nationally. And we are now working to the Mississippi River and both ends of the East Coast. So basically the eastern half of the United States we are offering our services to, and we are competing with, obviously the 2 other folks who are going to interview today are national companies competing at that level. As I said, we have 3 reserve specialists in the office. Tim is a professional engineer. Roy is a master, has a master's of architecture, but went directly into our work with our company. He's a younger fellow. We have a cost estimator who is a experienced construction cost estimator for construction projects. Like any reserve analysis company, we rely on various types of database for coming up with prices for things. RS Means is the database that we use, but we don't simply go to a database and select prices for things because things are much more complicated than that. Everything is unique. So we have a cost estimator who actually builds prices for our components, and we have our own database that we have basically constructed of built prices. And anything that we run into when we're doing a project that we don't have in our database, we go back to Tim and say, can you develop a price for this? So that's what he does. We also rely on, obviously, your cost history. What you actually are spending on things, we want to know that information too. You'll see on the DMA market development side, we have actually a community manager, a person who is an experienced community manager who assists us with our market development. And I think she just keeps us focused again on your issues and your concerns. The field representatives are people, are associated professionals. This is our current list. We are continually adding to this list as we go around. For a community like this, we would draw on a number of these people to come and actually do the site analysis work on site. Obviously, it's too big for one person to come in and do it by themselves. So we rely on a number of people, and you'll notice they are all professionals, either engineers or architects. We want people who are knowledgeable of the subject matter that we're dealing with. Now, what I'm going to do today is show you a sample reserve analysis that we've done for another client, and I'm going to let you have any questions that you want during that as we discuss it, or you can have questions afterwards. But one of the things we do, first of all, we develop our own software. So we don't have a canned program that we rely on and do reserve studies. We have a highly automated software that we are constantly improving and updating, which allows us to automate our analysis to the extent that when we do our analysis for a client such as yourself, we can come in and actually discuss the analysis in person and modify it in the meeting, in the discussion. So rather than bringing you a report, having you review a report and then come back with comments and say, can you change this or can you do that or whatever, and that becomes a long time consuming process, sorry, we actually can, in a meeting format, in a discussion, revise the analysis, look at different scenarios. We can move projects back and forth, we can accelerate or defer projects, so that you can see the impact of different courses of action and different decisions that you may want to make concerning both your components and your funding side.
Can you field on a question?
Yeah.
Looking at your organization, where are your finance people resources? Where do you reach out to get that?
Well, Tim actually is an MBA. So from that standpoint, other than that, when you say finance people, are you talking about for an investment side, for example?
Just the whole financial modeling of what the funding ought to be and the sources of it and how all that works.
Well, the source of your funding is essentially through your assessments.
Right.
Is that correct?
There you go. But there's also investments, there's also
Yes.
loans, there's all kinds of, just
All right.
asking.
Yeah, I'll show you that, because we have developed that in our software.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to put a reserve study up, and one of the things that we've done relative to communities such as this, or larger communities, and the community I'm going to show you is not as large as you, it's large enough to do this. Instead of having one schedule of components, one huge schedule, and a number of costs, we develop sub-accounts, okay? And this is just on the expenditure side, so it's a sub-account for different aspects of the community. This one called infrastructure simply means you see roads, paths, playgrounds, that sort of thing, things that are spread around through the community. We also have, okay, this community had a large aquatic and fitness center, which had an indoor pool and recreational areas, a fitness room. We also have another pool and racket club, quite an extensive tennis club in this community. So this community actually had components that we broke into 3 different sub-accounts. Now, a community like yours, and then, for example, we just late last year finished Montgomery Village in Maryland, is a larger community, and that probably has 13 sub-accounts in that community for the different aspects that they have. But I wasn't going to put all 13 here, so I'm using it smaller. What we do in this is, and I'll just take this one, is we can create a schedule of components for each sub-account, okay, that is focused on that sub-account. And you'll find in the analysis that we do, we get pretty specific. I think you probably can't read this.
Can we get the lights turned down a little? Don't help. I still can't read it, but that's.
There you go.
Yeah, that's better.
This one community center, we have about 250 components. And what we do is try to identify everything that you may spend money on out of your reserve account so that we have a database that, and we're ultimately going to give this database to you to manage so that you can track projects that you do, when you do them, what you paid for. This is all in an Excel, simple Excel format. I know you've had a discussion, I think, initially when folks came to your initial meeting on site about what should be in a reserve account, what shouldn't be in a reserve account. The fact is, anything that you replace, you're going to pay for out of one or the other account. You're going to pay out of your operating account or out of your reserve account. We tend to, and I think with the value of working with our software is that we tend to put more things in the reserve account and more specific things because we have the ability to track it here. When you put things in your operating account, you basically are not tracking them. You know, you're putting some money out there. You're putting a pot of money out there to say, things are going to happen this year. We don't know what. So we'll put money out there to accommodate that. By tracking them in the reserve account, you can actually track them when you replace them and you start to build record of what you're replacing, when you're replacing it, and what it costs, obviously. So we do that in each of these, and I'm going to go to just the other two. Far from me to see. Same thing. Each of these has a number of more than 100 components. And we're going to track the component. We're going to track when it was put in service, so that, for example, as you can see, some are old, some are new. When you replace a component, you can actually, in this spreadsheet, update the in-service date. Okay? We're projecting the useful life, and we actually have a double column projecting useful life, which we use many different ways. Sometimes if we have a component whose replacement is deferred presently, I'm not going to show a 25-year useful life on a component that's already 30 years old. That doesn't help anybody. So I'm going to put in this first column when I expect to replace it. Okay, given its condition, given the fact that it's still in use, I'm going to do that. In the second column, which is going to be the replacement schedule after the first replacement, I'm going to put in the expected or in what should be the replacement schedule for that component. So we have the ability to essentially adjust the component life going through the system. The other thing we can do, and you'll see over here we have a percentage of replacement column. Some components you don't replace in full. Concrete sidewalks. You're never going to replace all the sidewalks. You're going to replace pieces that have problems, essentially. So we can create a component like that. This here was asphalt paths, where we can put in a patch and repair or a partial replacement value, an allowance, if you will, against the entire component cost. Okay. In other words, we're quantifying the entire component. We know what it would cost to replace it all, and now we're creating an allowance. And so what we have is let's see. No, that's not a good one, but we have some where we can have an initial life where we're going to start replacing things, and then we can have an allowance life of, let's say, every 3 years, every 5 years, whatever. You're going to have a budget placing a percentage. All of these numbers are adjustable, obviously, in this spreadsheet. Here's the component quantities over here on the spreadsheet, and then we have a unit replacement cost and a total replacement cost. We actually put commentary about the components right in the spreadsheet. We're not developing a long, voluminous report with a discussion about components. You need to know certain things about that component. It's in bad condition or it's in good condition. It's got a problem. I can put it right there. Okay? You can put it there when you're updating this spreadsheet. All right? Now, the spreadsheet, as I noted, was long with about 250 components. So we then present that in an annual, probably blowing it up as I lose the numbers. This is just a problem. Presentation of Excel. All these are presented on an annual basis of what projects are expected on what year. All right. When we update that schedule of components, this updates. Okay. So we can move things around, and then we move them around in here, and decide. Well, we're not going to. This was a 2014 project. Okay, it's 2014. I'm not going to do this project this year. I want to go back to. Okay.
So what this allows you then is to basically you'll get a list of projects that per our schedule should be coming up.
Right.
There'll be some that aren't on that schedule that, a boiler goes or something like that you move up, but there'll be others that you can move back, and that should give you a printout at the end of what you need for budget planning.
Exactly. So. One of the biggest complaints about reserve studies is the reserve study is issued, and 3 months later it's out of date because life happens. Things don't happen the way you expect them to. So we're building not a study, building a tool that you can use. It's not a report, generate reports from it. Okay? So it's kind of a living tool that you can use.
And do we get the software, or do we just get the spreadsheet? When you say living tool,
you just get the Excel spreadsheet. It requires an interface with us to adjust the entire model.
So if we update this, our controller does updates based on changes. We would send them to you for the update, and then you can send us back the information.
Right.
So this is an ongoing relationship.
It can be, and we don't necessarily. I guess what I would say is we tend to customize everything to suit our clients. So we don't have a package that we're going to say, here's our package. We will even customize the layout of the software if it's of value to you to make it more useful to you. But we will also then do the ongoing services. We can do like a subscription basis. We work with Kiowa Island down in South Carolina that way. We just have an ongoing fee to pay a year. Or we just use a when you call us, when you need us, we do changes on an hourly basis. What I tried to do today, and it didn't work in this building, was to connect with the Richmond office, because a lot of the work we do with our clients is online. We'll do a go-to-meeting, and we can both sit there with the spreadsheets on the computer and adjust them in a meeting right then. We call the meeting the same day if we want to discuss it. Okay. So it's pretty easy to work with. Yes?
Can I go back to the point that Ted was making and with regard to projects? When you say develop projects, as I understand it, the context is more of a maintenance, minor construction project. It's not a capital improvement where you're replacing a building, per se.
Right.
Projects are more focused to what I would call a maintenance level.
Well, it's a replacement level, but it's a replacement of the component or a major repair. You know, you may be replacing the entire pool pump, or you may be replacing the motor. We can separate those out. If we track them in here, then you can track them. Okay. If you just say, well, I'm going to put the pump in here, but I'm going to put motor replacement and operating, then you're kind of losing control of what's happening when. Okay. So we tend to err on being more inclusive.
So this report doesn't say build a new yacht, per se.
What we do, because I think you'd ask that question. Let me bring up the next spreadsheet. So what I've got here is, in this case, I've got 3 sub-accounts on the expenditure side. They're tracking specific expenditures for specific facilities or the infrastructure. Now, these are all linked to a master funding account. And in the master funding account, up here, all of the annual expenditures for each of those sub-accounts is up here. And we create as many of these lines as we want, basically, and they just come over from those linked documents. Right? Those numbers again show up down here in this expenditure column. Right now they're the same numbers because I haven't put in an inflation rate, which I can do in this analysis. Okay? But in this program, one of the things that we can do, a little bit hard, this distance from we have a capital projects section of the analysis where we can actually put in, let's say, and we did this in Montgomery Village. They decided, they have 7 pool facilities. They decided that they were going to replace all 7 of them over the next 20 years. Now, they don't know exactly what they're going to do. They just did one this year. So we had a budget on that one. We had an actual construction budget. And we built an estimated cost on the others based on that construction budget and the different sizes of facilities. We can put in actually a total facility replacement in here, and this will enter into the reserve analysis in the year that we put it in. Let's say it's 2035. Put that in. What that will do when we put that in is it will cut off the funding for the present facility at that year, and it will start a funding stream based on the total, let's say it's a $2 million facility, based on a depreciation cost of that facility, which just, it puts a budget out there for that facility, even though we don't know much about it yet, except we know we're going to replace it, it'll probably cost this much money. Okay? So we have a way to anticipate total facility replacement, and we can plug that in or plug that out in a discussion and say, if we do the facility, how's that going to impact the reserve account? If we just continue maintaining the existing facility, how's that going to impact the reserve account? Okay. We also, in this analysis, you asked about, we have a calculator built into this program to look at loans. So we can plug in a loan if you feel you need to finance something. We can plug in the loan, it has the payback, and all that money goes into this, goes right into the cash flow schedule. special assessments, the dreaded special assessment, we plug that in if that's something we have to look at. That's good. I mean, but any of those we can look at and say, if we did this, how would that impact our whole funding plan? Okay. And down below here, you'll see investments. We can track investments because we'll have a general, we plug in interest earnings on the account as well. So you're going to have an interest earning on your bank account, your money market or whatever for your funds there. But I'm sure this community has many investments. Okay. We can plug those in the investment side, and they will track here separately. And what they will do is they will track when they mature, that cash will go back into this account on the date it matures. So that lets you know how much cash you have available that's essentially liquid at any given time. Now, this again is a 30-year schedule, and so it goes out 30 years. To make this easy to deal with, we have if I can see it. This is a graph of that schedule. Now this graph is tied into everything in the report. So what this is showing is all of the red bars in here are showing all of the annual expenditures from those 3 sub-accounts. Okay. Anytime we make a change in the sub-account, it will change this schedule. Okay, it will change the red bars. The green bars are the account balance. All right. Now and we're not showing we're not showing graphically their funding level. You have funding built in. It's down. We'll get to that. So you can see what happens. They've got so much money, and at their current funding level, it's dwindling down essentially over the course of the 30-year period.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Okay, that graph's interesting, and I presume would be to us. How do we access that graph? I mean, do we get to see it online? I mean, ourselves, or do we have to call somebody up and say, show us the graph?
We do it together. You get the graph in a report form, obviously. Everything that we do, we produce a report, which is essentially the reserve study. But if we wanted just the graph, if we want to move it, then we do that together, essentially.
Okay, moving the graph, that's we need to, but on the other hand, if I'm just at my computer and I want to say, okay, what the heck was that? Pull it up. I'm presuming we'll get it in both. We're getting it in an electronic format.
You're getting a PDF of this in electronic format, and you're getting the schedule of components in the Excel form.
Okay.
We don't give you all this software, no. And I think part of the reason for that is, first of all, we've got a lot built into it. There's quite a bit of capability in number one. Number two, we're constantly updating and adjusting. The present software we're using looks somewhat like this, but we've made a number of improvements and modifications to it since then. Now, this is showing their contribution level. Let me back up to one level.
Doug, did I remember correctly? You do offer a service where you could be a continuing advisor.
Yeah. Yes. Again, we can structure that depending on how you want to structure it. It can be a set fee that is just paid, and you just call us up and we sit down, or it can be on a time-by-time basis. Okay. And actually, in the proposal, we give that to you. What this is showing is, it's a little hard to read. This is showing the required, if you are funding each of those sub-accounts at 100%, basically, so you have 100% funding for all components. It shows what that funding should be, what the account balances should be, and then it shows the actual account balance in the account. These add up to, I think, $6 million or something. They've got $3.5 million. So they are about 60-some% funded, is all this is telling us here. That's why when we go back to this schedule, if they keep funding at that level, obviously if they're only 65% funded, they're not going to have enough money to do everything they need to do over time. Now, what I'm going to do, what I haven't done yet, is plugged in inflation. And inflation is, of course, a guess for all of us. We use look-back periods to make recommendations operations. This was in 2014, but we had basically a 1-year, 5-year, 10-year, 15-year look back periods, the average of inflation over those times. If I put in the 15-year number, let's see what happened. That was, and I'll read it for you so you can still see the graph.
Welcome to reality.
Yeah, that's 3.67%. That was an average of the inflation rate over the last 15 years, all right? What that did when I plugged that in was it escalated all of the expenditure costs going out in the future. And against that constant contribution, obviously, you know what's going to happen. So that's what happened there. Now, what we can do is very easily, what you have to, since you have inflation, you obviously have to expect to escalate your contribution over time. So we can look at that escalation and look at, well, what does it take to make this account work? I'm escalating this annually at this growing percentage rate. Now, one line I didn't mention it here is that yellow line. And if you're familiar with reserve funding plans, cash flow plans, there's a threshold that you can set. And we can move the threshold up and down. It's what you folks are comfortable with. That's a base that we want to keep the account above first year. All right?
Doug,
Yes.
what's the basis on which you're using that 15-year inflation rate? What's your
That is based on RS Means, who tracks
based on what?
RS Means Company, which tracks construction costs. They've tracked it for the last 50 years.
Okay. This has nothing to do with CPI or anything of that nature.
No, it is.
This is real-time data.
It's focused on construction-related costs.
Okay, good.
Right. We feel that's the most appropriate.
Yes.
So what I've done here in this analysis is I have said, well, if we increase your funding, you can see the numbers going up down here. I know you probably can't read it, but they start at 255,000, then if we go up to 289 or 269, 283, basically going up at 5.5% per year against that 3.67% inflation rate. This would fund everything over the 30-year period. I'm looking for that worst year and keeping it above the threshold. Right? Now, I don't, and the choice of the inflation rate is really up to you folks to decide what you want to project and work toward. I tend to look at a more conservative, I'll use conservative in the other direction. I like to use, because inflation has been somewhat stable over the last number of years, even though people keep saying it's going to go up, it's going to go up. In 2014, that average was 1.84% over the past 5 years. Okay, it's a little over 2% now, and we can I can manually adjust that and put that in if I want to. But when we send you this analysis, we send you a table of these look-back periods, and so you can think about that in terms of inflation. Because the other thing related to the inflation rate is all of these investment monies that you have, all those returns are related to inflation. Okay, so why project a high inflation rate with low returns on your investments? You know, you'd want to raise those projections as well, but we're going to put your actual returns on here, and that's why I like to disclose what's happening now as I can. So you see what happened here. Once I reduce the inflation rate, that's saying, well, I don't need to really maybe fund it at that aggressive a level. I'm going to drop this back. And there's two ways to look at this. One way, as I said, is just I want to stay above that threshold in the first year. Okay, that didn't go. So that's 3.2%. Now, that tells me that everything that we project in here, and there may be in this community, there may be 1,500 items or 2,000 items. I don't know what they be a lot, maybe twice that, will be funded at 100% when it needs to be, based on this graph. Okay. Now, but you can also see that, well, and we have communities where we see that low year somewhere up here in the middle of this graph. Okay. What this community is showing is there's a fairly high level of constant placement activity going on, and this fund is dwindling. So that may tell us that we really want to fund at a higher level to have a healthy account, at the end of that 30-year period. That's a choice, again, the board makes in terms of what they want to adopt as their funding plan. Okay? So all of this, you've seen how easily I've adjusted this. That's essentially what we can do at any time. Most of our clients will come back at budget time in following years and say, and they have updated their component schedules with what they've done, essentially. We can then rerun the analysis very quickly and see if it needs to be tweaked in a given year. We call this our, we changed that name to Reserve Navigator now, because it's basically navigating through the changing fortunes of what's going on in the community, essentially. So as you can see, we've got essentially everything built in and automated so that it's pretty easy to look at both the funding side and the expenditure side and make an as intelligent as you can, guessing the future plan for what you want to do in the future.
Let me ask you a question. From a practical standpoint, we get out kind of our list of what's due, and then we make a decision, we push back, we pull up, all of that kind of stuff. But when we talk about, let's say, our golfing building here, is there a way to pull up that, and that may have 70 components in it, everything from HVAC to roof to outside, all of that stuff. Is there a way to pull that up? So, because every year you get something that says, hey, we're going to put $12,000 in this year, $10,000 in this year. But is there a way to look at that all of the components there to make a bigger decision? For instance,
well, that's why we do the sub-account.
Yeah. Okay.
I would do a sub-account, and I can do it two ways. I can do a sub-account for the entire golf club, or I can do a sub-account, and I've done this for country clubs, do just the golf course, and a sub-account for the clubhouse facility, which has its own, it has a kitchen and catering facilities, whatever. That's a unique animal. So we can break that into one sub-account, and the landside facility, golf course, into another sub-account.
What if you have several sub-facilities within, like a maintenance facility?
It's up to you as to how you want to break it down. We're going to schedule everything, and it's not that much difficult to just break it into separate pieces, pots. Because if you had one of these with 500 components, how do I make a decision on that? But you have people who are focusing on the golf facility or the marina or a pool or parks. So different people can come and say, I know that's a problem because I work with that, and we got to deal with that.
What I'm looking at is that if you've got something where you're going to have to stick $100,000 a year in this because various different components are failing or have been, we're in a mature 40-year-old community.
Sure.
So for some of our structures, it's not applicable. But for the older ones, at what point do you hit the point where I'm going to spend $750,000 on this thing over the next 10 years and then still have a whole lot of stuff that's going to kick us in the butt? I'm just looking, is there a place?
Well, that's where we would put in the option for replacing the facility, putting in an estimated cost for replacement of the facility.
Well, let's take that analysis one step further. And that's an excellent. Now, this particular building that he's talking about is multi-purpose in that there are individuals that are utilizing parts of that building for various functions, dance class, drama class, card playing, those kinds of things.
Right.
So how do you take that into consideration in replacement of that particular building at an economical cost, whereby you may lose square footage or space for these kinds of activities going on in that building now? How do you take that into consideration? Am I being clear?
Well, but I don't think that's something that the consultant should dictate. I mean, you folks need to decide what facilities and what programs you want to accommodate in a facility. I'm not going to tell you, well, you can't have dance classes in this anymore.
No. That's not what I mean. What I'm trying to get at is that if it is economically feasible to replace that particular golf building as a golf building that is being utilized for something other than a golf building, that those items that are not being utilized as a golf building must be placed somewhere else. They must be utilized. I mean,
if that's the option, what you're saying is you might
to be created elsewhere.
You might replace that facility with two facilities. Is that what you're saying?
Or a-
something like that.
A multi-purpose, like
or
a
smaller facility.
kind of like a sub-community center like this.
Right.
In addition to the golf facility.
Right.
The golf facility will be smaller because it's going to be dedicated to golf,
Right.
theoretically.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure.
as I understand these processes, the organization has to put together a list of assumptions for each facility.
Sure.
And the assumption is, in this case, they're talking about the country club. The country club, for the purposes of this software, you have to decide whether you're going to replace the building there or not. Because your engineers coming on site are going to look at the building and go, if you wanted to rebuild this, here's the number. If you don't want to rebuild that, well, what is it you want to build? We have to come up with the assumptions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this doesn't work, right?
The reserve study is purely a financial analysis
Right.
of what you're doing. You're getting into architectural programming.
That's correct.
And so that may be a separate project that you want to get into. I want to develop a program. I know I want to replace this, so I want to get into a program for doing just what you said. I want this facility, the new facility, to just be a golf facility. And I have all these other programs that I want to accommodate somewhere else. You got to find the land for that if I want. But that's a different project that you would hire someone to do. I mean, we could do it, but it's not what we normally
It's not part
do.
of the reserve
Yeah,
study.
right.
But if I understand, can you, and I, at least on a rough basis, do cost estimate for a new facility?
Sure.
Given that, we give you the basic information on the
Based on typical building costs for that type of building.
You're
Yes.
not going to do all that.
So if we looked at those specifications then, and we could use the same tool to be able to determine that cost, twice the cost of, let's say, a major renovation, which would give,
Right.
and versus the cost of just keeping going along and doing owner replacement.
There are many aspects of a facility, a community like this, that may require specific engineering studies for something. I don't know if you get into dredging of channels. So you may need a firm to just look at that specializes in.
We would go to a third party.
You go to the third party, but then they bring back an estimated cost. We plug it in.
Correct.
And what that usually does is that tells you I can do it in 2017 or I have to wait until 2023. Okay.
What I guess I'm trying to get my arms around is how far does your firm go? You walk up to, we use the country club as an example. You're standing outside the country club. Are you in a position, or is it your core business to say this is the condition this building is in and how long it's going to last? Or that's part of the assumptions we have to feed to you as to what those things are?
We're going to talk about the condition of the building and components.
Okay.
Now, I guess my answer to that is, and I think it was kind of alluded to here, a lot of times we'll walk into a new community and say, well, this will last 50 years. Then I do a community that's 120 years old, and it's the same build. They have the building that was built 120 years ago. They've been spending money to renovate it. I can't make that call as to whether you want to replace the building. I mean, I can certainly, if it's in very dire straits, I can say it would be better to replace it than to maintain it. But, the fact is, you can keep buildings going for a long time. It's really a matter of
What you're going to get out of this is that there are, say, 500 components in this building, and you're going to have a list of when these components come up based on life. And you're going to know what it cost in a certain year to replace that building based on the RS means, if you're replacing it in 17, 22, whatever. But it's not going to tell you either use or whether part of that is, okay, that's part of what I was getting at, is when we print out that subcomponent, that's when you have to make decisions as a community, as a board. Have I reached the tipping point?
Right.
And if I did reach the tipping point, then what do I want to use that facility for in the future? If I've reached the point where I have to replace a facility, then we're kind of out of the reserve study and into trying to figure out what you want to have, which is a different ballgame.
That's where I thought the wall was.
Yeah, that's
That's
exactly
right.
where it is.
But it is one of the things, and we talk about projected service life, there's a lot of factors that affect that. One is something physically wears out. One is it's obsolete. I'm going to replace it because, I can keep it going, but there's new technology now. security systems. I don't want to keep my old camera system because there's a new camera system that's much better. Okay, that's a reason to replace the old. Programmatic reasons is another thing, and I can't predict that. You have to tell us this is no longer satisfying our programmatic needs for the community. Therefore, we want to replace it.
Well, Kay brought up the tipping point, but I think one of the drivers is ADA and the fact that
Sure.
That's all. But that all comes back to us looking at it.
Correct, but there's a certain point where we'll have a component how long they're going to last. Now, major renovations run into that point where
once
we
you
go
and
past
we
a certain
do
point.
we do analyze that in a reserve study. If you're looking at a major renovation, we can tell that it's not compliant with present codes.
Okay, so that
You're
can
going to
be,
have to upgrade it.
that can be factored
Yes.
in there.
Yes.
Okay.
And basically, this thing ends up being a double tool. One of the biggest problems we've had as a community is maintaining on a regular basis what we have. That's what everybody always says. You didn't maintain. This, by breaking these components out, tells you in 2016 you need to replace, based on its life. Now, you may make the choice not to replace it because you have additional years. And you may also find something that you weren't going to replace for 2 more years that ends up getting popped forward. And so, but it also puts that component every year that we should be doing X, Y, and Z. But when you look at it as a subcategory, it says, look, am I going to spend $250,000 a year on this thing, or $250,000 over 3 years on a building that, say, cost $500,000? Or am I going to replace it? Where does the ADA, how does that, it requires some analysis on our part on the big picture. This gives us what we should be doing. And that's a living document that shoves back and forth. It's a capital and major maintenance plan is what it is.
We're giving you a tool to help you make those decisions that you have to.
And also from not only a budgeting, from a maintenance thing, because we have to get to a point where if we build a new building, keeping the thing up to extend that life long term, so we don't end up in a situation where weeds are growing through the.
I think my time is up, but I think to summarize, what I wanted to show you today was essentially how we approach a project like this. We can customize our work to satisfy your needs. You brought up some issues that certainly there are ways we can address that in studies, but we would mainly break down. We err on the side of being thorough. We break it down into pots and pieces so that you can deal with them, but that we want to make sure we've got everything covered in the scope. So that when we look at the funding plan, because this is another complaint about reserve studies, was, well, that wasn't in the reserve study. This wasn't in the reserve study, but I had to pay for it out of the reserve account. Sometimes I get people calling me, can I pay for it out of the reserve account? Sure. It's a reserve item. We'll add it to the reserve study. It's less likely that we're going to have missed it because we're trying to be thorough, but that does happen too. And we'll add it. And then we'll rerun the navigator and see what it does.
Just a quick question for you. I know your time's limited. The question I had, if we were to engage with your company, give me the process. What are we talking? 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Who comes in? When do they come in? Who do we engage with?
You would engage with probably myself.
Okay.
To initiate the project.
Okay.
And once we had a contract, we would then determine how we were going to staff this. And one of the things I need to think about in the proposal is what the steps are in terms of doing this. I think we gave you a preliminary concept that I think was like a 10-week project schedule. That's probably a realistic project schedule to get to a draft. Okay.
Gotcha.
But as I'm going to look at it obviously a little bit more before I give you the actual cost proposal. Maybe longer.
One of the things we're going to do, Doug, is to give you kind of an RFP on this, which kind of, based on our analysis, is here. And Jerry's going to add a couple little things to it that he'll send by email either tomorrow, on Monday to you. But it takes that RFI you had, and then based on the feedback we got, specifically asked, for instance, what do you need from us in terms of documentation?
Right.
How much? That kind of stuff, so that when you do give us a proposal next week, and like you said, add in some of these other things here so we can pick and choose on. So he's going to give you a copy of that.
Good.
Email you based on a couple of things you said here today, just to make sure.
I'm assuming we're in July here that this reserve analysis would affect 2016's, the next year's budget, not this coming.
That's correct.
Yeah. I have a question. Maybe to help us in our, you mentioned Montgomery Village. Could you, to help us in doing our due diligence, do you have some references that we use?
I think we gave you we gave you communities with contact people.
Okay, so
that was one of
we
them.
have a contact point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, down the street. Yeah, they've given us, and that'll be in part of the recommendation part, Kiowa Island, Governor's Land, Fawn Lake, Montgomery Village, for instance. So you run from anywhere from 700 homes to 12,000 homes from, so you've got a whole cross-section of stuff. So,
there's a whole bunch of people.
okay. Do you have any questions for us?
I think what you just told me that you're going to give us more information will probably, I may have some questions when I get that.
Okay.
But obviously, I really appreciate being one of the three folks to come down here and talk.
Right.
Yeah, well, thank you very much for coming in. It's very
Thank
interesting.
you.
Thank you.
Well, I'm one of the ongoing costs. Because I need to know.
Appreciate being here.